The atmosphere inside Madison Square Garden on May 11, 1993, crackled with electricity as the Chicago Bulls faced the New York Knicks in Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The rivalry between these teams had reached mythic proportions, with the physical Knicks determined to dethrone Jordan's Bulls, the two-time defending champions. New York's famous arena, often called the world's most famous arena, lived up to its reputation that night, packed to capacity with 19,163 fans, celebrities, die-hard Knicks supporters, and basketball purists who had come to witness greatness regardless of team allegiance. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The Bulls led the series 2-1, and the Knicks desperately needed this home win to avoid falling into a 3-1 hole that few teams in NBA history had ever escaped. The New York crowd, known for its basketball sophistication and unrelenting passion, created a wall of sound that seemed to physically press down on the court, a thunderous reminder that the Bulls were deep in enemy territory. Michael Jordan, at the peak of his powers at age 30, had arrived at the Garden with the focused determination that had become his trademark. During warm-ups, he moved with mechanical precision, his practice jumpers finding nothing but net, his demeanor serious and unsmiling, despite the taunts and jeers from early arriving Knicks fans. In the visitors' locker room before tip-off, Jordan had been unusually quiet, according to teammate Scottie Pippen. "Mike's got that look tonight," Pippen had whispered to Horace Grant. "New York's in trouble." This was Jordan in full competitive mode, the player that opponents feared and teammates relied upon, the athlete who had transformed himself from a high-flying scoring machine into a complete basketball destroyer. The red number 23 Bulls jersey he wore wasn't just fabric and thread, it was armor, a symbol of basketball royalty that struck fear into opponents before the ball was even tipped. The game began as a defensive slugfest, exactly the style that favored the physical Knicks. New York coach Pat Riley had constructed his team specifically to counter Jordan, with guards John Starks and Derek Harper assigned to harass him constantly, and center Patrick Ewing protecting the rim against his legendary drives. The first quarter ended with the Knicks leading 22-19, the low score a testament to the defensive intensity. Jordan had managed just 6 points on 3 of 8 shooting, visibly frustrated by the constant double teams and physical play that the referees were allowing. During the break between quarters, Bulls coach Phil Jackson pulled Jordan aside. "They're trying to get in your head, Michael. Find the rhythm. The game will open up." Jordan nodded, his eyes never leaving the court as he mentally recalibrated his approach. As the second quarter unfolded, Jordan began finding seams in the Knicks' defense. A fadeaway jumper over Starks, a quick spin move past Harper for a layup. The Bulls clawed back to take a 1-point lead, and the Madison Square Garden crowd grew increasingly anxious, familiar with Jordan's ability to take over games. With 3 minutes remaining in the half, Jordan caught the ball on the right wing, faced up against Starks and executed his signature jab step. Starks, anticipating a drive, grabbed a handful of Jordan's jersey as he tried to stay in front of him. It was a common defensive tactic, one that often went uncalled in the physical basketball of the early 90s, especially in playoff games. But on this particular play, the fabric of Jordan's jersey, stretched to its limit, gave way with a distinct tearing sound that was audible even amid the arena's roar. The rip started at the right shoulder seam and tore diagonally across Jordan's back, creating a jagged opening that exposed his skin and the white tank top he wore underneath. The play continued for several seconds before a whistle finally blew on an unrelated foul under the basket. As players walked toward the free throw line, cameras caught the full extent of the damage. The iconic Bulls jersey hanging awkwardly from Jordan's frame, the number 2 intact on one side but the 3 partially torn through. A murmur swept through Madison Square Garden as the Jumbotron showed the replay, the crowd's reaction a mix of derisive cheers at Jordan's predicament and genuine fascination at this unexpected development in a crucial playoff game. The Bulls equipment manager rushed to the bench with a replacement jersey, and coach Phil Jackson signaled for Jordan to come out of the game for a quick change. It was the logical move. Take 30 seconds to swap jerseys and return to the court properly uniformed. But as the substitute player rose from the bench, Jordan waved him off with an emphatic gesture that surprised even his teammates. "I'm staying in," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The equipment manager stood awkwardly at the sideline, replacement jersey in hand, as Jackson raised an eyebrow, but didn't press the issue. Jordan adjusted what remained of his torn jersey, tucking the hanging portion into his shorts to prevent it from flapping, and returned to his defensive position with a defiance that was palpable even from the highest seats in the arena. The Knicks, sensing an opportunity to capitalize on the distraction, immediately ran a play to attack Jordan, with Starks driving directly at him while shouting something that television microphones didn't catch, but that clearly had the intended effect of further irritating the Bulls superstar. What happened next would become one of the defining moments of Jordan's career. Instead of being thrown off his game, Jordan stripped Starks clean, gathering the ball and accelerating into the open court. With only Knicks point guard Derek Harper between him and the basket, Jordan elevated for what everyone expected to be one of his trademark dunks. Harper, giving up 6 inches but determined to prevent an emphatic slam that might energize the Bulls, leaped to contest the shot and made significant contact with Jordan mid-air. In that suspended moment, with Jordan hanging in the air absorbing contact, his torn jersey fluttered like a battle flag. Instead of attempting to draw the foul, Jordan double-clutched, switched the ball from his right hand to his left, and somehow managed to bank the ball off the glass and into the basket as he crashed to the hardwood. The Madison Square Garden crowd, despite their allegiance to the home team, couldn't contain their appreciation for the display of athletic brilliance. A collective "ooh" echoed through the arena, followed immediately by applause that transcended team loyalty, the involuntary response of basketball fans witnessing something extraordinary. As Jordan picked himself up off the floor, he didn't celebrate or flex. He merely adjusted his tattered jersey once more and jogged back on defense, his expression unchanged, but his message delivered. NBA rules actually required players to wear proper uniforms, and the officials huddled briefly to discuss the situation. The lead referee approached the Bulls bench, presumably to insist that Jordan change into the replacement jersey, but Jackson intercepted him with a conversation that viewers could see but not hear. Whatever the Zen master said apparently worked, as the referee nodded and returned to his position without forcing the substitution. The TNT broadcast team of Bob Neal and Hubie Brown speculated about this unusual development. "I've never seen this before," Brown commented, "but if anyone gets special treatment in this league, it's going to be Michael Jordan. And frankly, the way he's playing right now with that torn jersey, I don't think the Bulls want him changing a thing." As the second quarter wound down, the torn jersey seemed to liberate something primal in Jordan's game. His movements became more fluid, more aggressive, as if the partially shed uniform represented a shedding of constraints. He scored 8 points in the final 2 minutes of the half, including a 3-pointer at the buzzer that put the Bulls up 48-42 and sent the team into the locker room with momentum. The Knicks players walked off with slumped shoulders, while the Madison Square Garden crowd sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. In the Bulls locker room, equipment staff prepared a fresh jersey for the second half, the pristine number 23 laid out in Jordan's spot. But as halftime concluded and players retook the floor, Jordan emerged still wearing the tattered remains of his original jersey, now held together with what appeared to be clear athletic tape, a makeshift solution that seemed more symbolic than practical. The MSG crowd, which had been hostile toward Jordan and the Bulls during player introductions, now watched with a complex mix of emotions as he warmed up for the second half. There was still the desire to see their Knicks win, of course, but it was now tinged with a grudging appreciation for the competitive spirit on display. A few fans near the Bulls bench even called out encouragement, "Way to play through it, Mike!" The transformation of the crowd's relationship with their longtime antagonist was beginning, a shift from seeing Jordan simply as the enemy to recognizing him as a rare athletic specimen whose commitment to competition transcended normal boundaries. The ripped jersey had humanized the superstar, while simultaneously highlighting his extraordinary determination, creating a compelling narrative tension that had 20,000 people on the edge of their seats as the third quarter began. The third quarter opened with a deliberate play to Jordan, a clear message from Phil Jackson about who would be leading the Bulls despite, or perhaps because of, the unusual uniform situation. Jordan caught the ball in the post, backed down Starks and hit a fadeaway jumper that barely moved the net, extending the Bulls' lead to 8. As he turned to run back on defense, the full extent of his torn jersey was visible to the crowd and television viewers. What had started as a shoulder tear had worsened, with the number 3 now almost completely separated and additional tears forming across the back. The white tank top underneath was fully visible, creating a stark contrast against the Red Bulls jersey that made Jordan look like a gladiator with battle-damaged armor. Remarkably, this disheveled appearance seemed to enhance rather than diminish his aura, adding a raw streetball quality to the NBA's biggest superstar. The Knicks, desperate to regain control of the game, attacked relentlessly on offense, while continuing their physical defense against Jordan. Patrick Ewing, New York's franchise center, began dominating inside, scoring 10 quick points to cut the Bulls' lead to 3. During a timeout with 7 minutes left in the third quarter, TNT's cameras caught an intense exchange between Jordan and Bulls center Bill Cartwright. "They think they can wear you down," Cartwright said, nodding toward the Knicks huddle. "They think that jersey means you're vulnerable." Jordan's response was immediate and firm. "Then they don't know me at all." This brief moment of teammate interaction, caught by a sideline microphone and broadcast to millions, perfectly encapsulated the psychological dimension of what was unfolding, a torn piece of fabric becoming a battlefield of perception and willpower. As play resumed, the Bulls seemed to feed off Jordan's defiance. Scottie Pippen, often overshadowed by his more famous teammate, stepped up with a series of defensive plays that disrupted the Knicks' offensive rhythm. Horace Grant controlled the boards, limiting New York to 1 shot per possession. B.J. Armstrong hit 2 crucial three-pointers, but all eyes remained on Jordan, whose torn jersey had now become the visual centerpiece of the broadcast. The TNT directors seemed to recognize the narrative power of this unusual situation, cutting frequently to close-ups of the damaged uniform, particularly during free throws, when Jordan would adjust the hanging fabric before shooting. Hubie Brown noted on commentary, "In all my years in basketball, I've never seen anything quite like this. We're watching Jordan literally coming apart at the seams physically, but mentally he seems more locked in than ever." The Madison Square Garden crowd, known for its basketball sophistication, began showing increasingly divided loyalties. While they still cheered enthusiastically for their Knicks, there was now audible appreciation when Jordan made an exceptional play. This gradual shift represented something deeper than mere respect for athletic excellence. It was the recognition of a rare competitive spirit that transcended team allegiance. A particularly telling moment came midway through the third quarter when Jordan, driving baseline, was met with a hard foul from Knicks enforcer Charles Oakley that sent him crashing into the photographer's row. As Jordan picked himself up, adjusting his increasingly deteriorating jersey, a strange thing happened. A section of Knicks fans actually applauded, not mockingly but genuinely, acknowledging the determination to continue under adversity. The Bulls bench reacted to this unusual crowd response with visible surprise, exchanging glances that seemed to say, "Are they cheering for Michael in New York?" Phil Jackson, the master of psychological warfare, seized on the moment, shouting to his team during the next dead ball, "They're with us now, they're watching something special and they know it." This comment, picked up by the courtside microphones and later replayed countless times in highlight packages, captured the strange alchemy taking place. How a simple wardrobe malfunction had transformed into a character study of an athlete's resilience, creating an unexpected connection between Jordan and the very fans who had come to root against him. With 2 minutes remaining in the third quarter, the game's intensity reached new heights as the Knicks reclaimed a 1-point lead on an Ewing dunk that sent Madison Square Garden into a frenzy. The momentum seemed to be shifting back to the home team, with the Bulls suddenly looking disorganized on offense and a step slow on defense. During a Bulls timeout, the cameras focused on Jordan, sitting slightly apart from his teammates, his torn jersey now barely holding together despite the athletic tape. He stared at the floor, his expression unreadable as Phil Jackson diagrammed a play. When the huddle broke, Jordan was the last to stand, seemingly lost in thought, a rare moment of visible introspection from the usually hyper-focused superstar that made viewers wonder if the physical and emotional toll of the night was finally catching up to him. Those questions were answered seconds after play resumed. The Bulls ran the play Jackson had drawn up, but the Knicks defended it perfectly, leaving Jordan isolated at the top of the key against Starks as the shot clock wound down. What happened next would be replayed on highlight reels for years to come. Jordan, with his jersey now hanging so loosely that it resembled a torn cape, executed a crossover dribble so quick that Starks momentarily lost his footing. Instead of driving to the basket as everyone expected, Jordan rose up from 20 feet and released a jumper that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. As the ball swished through the net, Jordan held his follow-through pose, the tattered remains of his jersey fluttering with the movement, creating an image that photographers instinctively knew was destined for basketball immortality. The visual power of that moment, Jordan in his torn jersey, arm extended in perfect form, surrounded by the iconic Madison Square Garden backdrop, transcended the game itself. It was basketball as high art, competitive spirit distilled to its purest form, vulnerability and strength perfectly balanced. The TNT broadcast went to commercial break with this image frozen on screen, the director recognizing its significance. When they returned, sideline reporter Craig Sager revealed a fascinating detail. I'm told the Bulls equipment manager has approached Michael 3 different times about changing jerseys, and each time Jordan has refused. One Bulls staffer told me, "At this point, we're just hoping the whole thing doesn't fall off before the final buzzer." As the fourth quarter began with the Bulls clinging to a 3-point lead, the physical nature of the game intensified further. The Knicks, following Riley's game plan, continued targeting Jordan, sending double teams whenever he touched the ball and making every cut and movement as difficult as possible. Jordan's torn jersey became a literal target, with defenders grabbing at the loose fabric when referees weren't looking, a tactic that was technically illegal but consistent with the no-holds-barred playoff basketball of that era. During one particularly physical sequence, Knicks forward Anthony Mason grabbed the hanging portion of Jordan's jersey while battling for a rebound, causing an additional tear that nearly separated the front of the jersey entirely. The referee either missed the grab or chose to ignore it, but the Madison Square Garden crowd reacted with a collective groan that indicated even they felt this crossed a line. Jordan's response to this escalating targeting was telling. Rather than showing frustration or appealing to the officials, he simply became more determined, more focused, channeling the physical challenges into competitive fuel. With 9 minutes remaining in the game, he drove hard to the basket, absorbed contact from 2 Knicks defenders, and still managed to convert a difficult layup while being fouled. As he walked to the free throw line, the camera zoomed in on his face, sweat-soaked, jaw set, eyes burning with intensity. It wasn't the expression of someone bothered by uniform issues or physical play. It was the look of an athlete completely immersed in competition, using every obstacle as motivation. He sank the free throw, putting the Bulls up by 6 and temporarily silencing the Garden crowd. The game's final minutes became a showcase for Jordan's complete skill set, torn jersey and all. A baseline fade away over Starks, a perfectly timed assist to Pippen for a dunk, a steal from Harper that led to a fast break. Each play further cemented the unusual bond that had formed between the opposing team's superstar and the notoriously tough New York crowd. With 47 seconds remaining and the Bulls leading by 4, Jordan made perhaps his most impressive play of the night, a defensive stop on Ewing that required him to switch onto a player nearly a foot taller, holding his ground and forcing a missed shot without fouling. As Pippen secured the rebound and the Bulls called timeout, something remarkable happened. A significant portion of the Madison Square Garden crowd actually stood and applauded. It wasn't for their Knicks, who were on the verge of falling behind 3-1 in the series, but for the competitor in the shredded jersey who had turned a potential embarrassment into a display of athletic determination that transcended team loyalty. The final moments of the game proceeded with the clinical efficiency that characterized the Jordan-era Bulls in close contests. Chicago ran their offense with precision, bleeding the clock and making free throws when fouled. The Knicks fought valiantly but couldn't close the gap, and as the final buzzer sounded on a 105-95 Bulls victory, Jordan stood at center court, adjusting what remained of his jersey one last time, a gesture that seemed both practical and symbolic. The TNT cameras lingered on this image before cutting to the disheartened Knicks players and then to the Madison Square Garden crowd, many of whom remained in their seats despite their team's defeat. The usual protocol after an NBA playoff game was for the winning team to quickly exit the court, particularly in a hostile environment, but something unusual happened as Jordan began walking toward the tunnel. It started with a few fans near the Bulls bench, rising to their feet in a show of appreciation. Then another section joined and another, until a significant portion of Madison Square Garden was standing and applauding, not for their beloved Knicks, but for an opposing player who had shown them something beyond ordinary athletic excellence. Jordan, typically stoic after road victories, paused his walk to the locker room and looked up, seemingly surprised by the reaction. After a moment's hesitation, he raised his hand in acknowledgement, a simple gesture that recognized the extraordinary connection that had formed over the previous 2 hours. Knicks superfan Spike Lee, famous for his courtside trash-talking of Jordan, was caught on camera shaking his head with a reluctant smile that seemed to say, "I can't even be mad at that performance." In the Bulls' locker room, the mood was celebratory but focused. This was, after all, a team accustomed to playoff success. Jordan's torn jersey had already been collected by an equipment manager and placed in a plastic bag for preservation, replaced by a fresh team warm-up suit for the post-game interviews. When reporters entered, they naturally surrounded Jordan's locker, questions about the jersey dominating the initial exchanges. "Why didn't you change it?" asked a New York Post journalist. Jordan considered the question before answering, "It wasn't affecting my play." In the playoffs, you don't change what's working. A follow-up question about whether it was a superstitious decision brought Jordan's trademark competitive grin. "Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted them to know that it takes more than tearing my uniform to throw me off my game." Phil Jackson, addressing the media in a separate area, offered his characteristically philosophical perspective on the night's unusual events. "Basketball is full of metaphors if you're paying attention. Michael's jersey being torn but him refusing to leave the battle, there's something almost mythological about that, isn't there? Like a warrior whose armor is damaged, but whose spirit remains intact." When asked if he had considered forcing Jordan to change jerseys, Jackson chuckled. "Have you tried to make Michael Jordan do something he doesn't want to do? Besides, he was in a zone. The last thing any coach wants to do is break a player's rhythm when they're seeing the game that clearly." Back in the arena, as maintenance crews began the post-game cleanup and most fans filed toward the exits, a small drama unfolded at the Bulls tunnel. A young fan, maybe 12 years old, had made his way down to the railing with a homemade sign reading, "MJ, can I have your torn jersey?" Security initially moved to intercept him, but something about the boy's earnestness caught the attention of Bulls assistant coach Johnny Bach, who was one of the last team members to leave the court. Bach disappeared briefly into the locker room corridor, returning minutes later with bad news for the hopeful fan. "Sorry, kid, that jersey's already being sent to Springfield." The boy looked confused until Bach clarified, "The Basketball Hall of Fame. Some things are too important for a private collection." Whether this was actually true or a kind way of saying the jersey wasn't available, it reflected the immediate recognition that what had happened that night transcended an ordinary NBA playoff game. The next morning, the torn jersey dominated sports media coverage. The New York Times sports section featured a front-page photo of Jordan in mid-jump shot, the tattered red fabric clearly visible against the white background of his undershirt. The headline read, "Jordan unravels but Knicks fall apart." ESPN's Sports Center led with an extended highlight package of the game, commentator Dan Patrick noting, "We've seen Michael Jordan seemingly defy physics before, but last night he seemed to defy basic uniform regulations, conventional wisdom, and even the hostile environment of Madison Square Garden." NBA Commissioner David Stern, interviewed on a morning radio show, gracefully sidestepped questions about whether the league would fine Jordan for violating uniform policies. "There are rules, and then there are moments that remind us why we love sports. I think we all know which category last night falls into." In the pre-social media era, the cultural impact of such moments took longer to fully materialize, but was perhaps more lasting because of it. Sports Illustrated's next issue featured Jordan on the cover, torn jersey and all, with the simple headline, "Unbreakable." Nike's marketing team, recognizing a golden opportunity, rushed to produce a commercial that recreated the image of the torn jersey with the tagline, "Some boundaries aren't meant to be respected," which would air during the NBA Finals just weeks later. Street basketball courts across America suddenly saw an uptick in kids deliberately tearing their jerseys in imitation of their hero, much to the chagrin of parents everywhere. The moment had transcended sport to become a cultural touchstone, a visual shorthand for perseverance and competitive fire. For the Bulls and Knicks, the series continued its physical, intense trajectory. Chicago would go on to win in 6 games before eventually securing their 3rd consecutive NBA championship by defeating the Phoenix Suns in the finals. The torn jersey game, as it came to be known, was referenced frequently during the remainder of the playoffs, becoming part of the lore of Jordan's career, alongside the flu game and the shot. Jordan himself rarely discussed it in detail, typically deflecting questions with brief acknowledgments that it was just another playoff game, or what needed to be done at the time. His standard approach to downplaying his own mythology, even as it grew around him. What few knew at the time but would emerge years later in retrospectives and documentaries was the bittersweet context surrounding that season. The 1992-93 campaign would be Jordan's last before his first retirement. His departure from basketball prompted by his father's tragic murder and his own burnout from the constant pressure of global fame. In this light, the torn jersey game takes on additional poignancy, a moment when Jordan, months away from walking away from the sport he dominated, demonstrated the competitive essence that defined him. The jersey itself, contrary to the story told to the young fan at Madison Square Garden, didn't immediately go to the Hall of Fame. Instead, according to Bulls equipment manager John Ligmanowski, in a 2003 interview, Jordan kept it in his personal collection, one of the few game-worn items he chose to retain from his playing career. The legacy of the torn jersey game continued to evolve long after the final buzzer. In basketball circles, it became a reference point for discussions about competitive mindset and mental toughness. Coaches at all levels used it as an example when teaching players to overcome adversity. The physical artifact of the jersey itself gained almost mythical status, with various memorabilia collectors offering increasingly astronomical sums for what had become one of the most iconic pieces of basketball history. Jordan, characteristically private about his personal memorabilia collection, never confirmed whether he still possessed the jersey, adding another layer of mystery to its legend. In a rare comment about the game during a 2013 interview celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Bulls' third championship, Jordan offered perhaps his most revealing perspective. Looking back, I think what people responded to wasn't just that I kept playing with a torn jersey. It was that they got to see something real in a game that's become so polished, so corporate. For a few minutes, it wasn't about the perfect image or the marketing. It was just about competition in its purest form. The torn jersey game serves as a perfect encapsulation of Michael Jordan's career. The supernatural talent housed in a very human body, the unmatched competitive drive, the ability to convert potential setbacks into advantages, the gradual transformation from athlete to cultural icon. It reminds us why, decades after his final retirement, Jordan remains the standard against which all basketball greatness is measured. And perhaps most poignantly, it captures a moment when 20,000 New Yorkers, who had come to root against him, found themselves cheering instead, overcome by the simple power of witnessing someone refuse to be defined by their circumstances, even something as seemingly trivial as a torn piece of fabric. In Madison Square Garden that night, as his jersey unraveled but his resolve strengthened, Jordan offered more than an athletic performance. He provided a visceral reminder of what it means to face adversity with unflinching determination, a lesson whose resonance extends far beyond the basketball court. The physical jersey itself, whether preserved in Jordan's private collection or secured in some climate-controlled sports memorabilia vault, has long since deteriorated further with age. But the image remains pristine in basketball memory. Jordan at the height of his powers, the torn red fabric exposing the human beneath the superhero, his expression revealing nothing but absolute focus despite the chaos. It's a visual that captures something essential about competitive greatness that words alone cannot convey. A moment when what could have been embarrassment instead became emblematic of an athlete's transcendent will. And for those fortunate enough to have been in Madison Square Garden that night, it remains a cherished memory of witnessing not just athletic excellence, but the rarer quality of unshakable resolve. A torn jersey revealing the unbreakable spirit of the man who wore it.